Hello, today we're going to be learning about histology or the study of tissues, and we're going to be learning about different types of tissues. We're going to talk about epithelial tissues, connective tissues, muscle tissue, and nervous tissue. So, histology is the study of tissues. And if we were to define what a tissue was, a tissue is a group of cells that have specialized structural and functional roles. So these are groups of cells that work together. And we have about 200 different tissues in our body. And again, there are four main types there's epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous tissue. So you can see here the different types of tissue. When we talk about the different tissues, we are going to be talking about their shapes, how they are layered as far as cells go, interesting characteristics, location, and function. And again, we're going to take these one by one. We're going to start off learning about epithelial tissue, then we'll review the connective, then muscle, and then the nervous. So, one thing that we need to discuss is what extracellular matrix is. This is a non living portion within a tissue. It's a very supporting network that surrounds the cells, and it is going to allow for signals to be transmitted from outside cells to the inside cells. So, it's going to be pretty important when we talk about the different structure. Our first type of tissue to talk about is epithelial tissue. This is so widespread throughout the body. It is going to cover all organs and exposed surfaces. It's going to form the inner lining of body cavities. It's going to form glands, both exocrine and endocrine. And it's going to secrete, absorb, excrete, and sensory reception. And there's also protection and filtration that goes along with all of that. There are certain characteristics of epithelial tissue. One thing is that they always have a free surface. That means that they're exposed to gases, liquids, solids. They're exposed to something. They're also anchored to connective tissue by a basement membrane. Now, the basement membrane is a very thin membrane, and it's going to connect the epithelial tissue to the connective tissue. All epithelial tissue lacks blood cells. So we call this avascular. This is pretty good for injuries because it heals quicker. But because there's no blood vessels, these cells have to get their nutrients by absorption and diffusion. Another characteristic of epithelial cells is that the cells will readily divide. High rate of regeneration, which is wonderful because they are on the outside surface. And when we have all of their cells that make up epithelial tissue together, we can see that they're very tightly packed. There's very little of that extracellular matrix that I've talked about. Now, sometimes they have microvilli, and this is typically very abundant when we have things that need absorption and secretion. Sometimes they have cilia on their free surface, and that would be in the lungs. And sometimes they have what are called stereocilia, which are smaller, and that would line the reproductive tract. We are going to talk about each one of these tissues, and you will be using the microscope and doing a little project on this. So we're going to take these one by one as a slide, but I wanted you just to see what types of epithelial tissues there were, and we will get more in depth of them. One thing about epithelial tissue, they could be one layered or they could be multiple layers. If it is one layer, we call that simple stratified. If it is multiple layers, we call that stratified. And you can see here in this picture, excuse me, I'll go back, that the apical surface is that free surface, and the basal surface is attached with the basement membrane to the connective tissue. So simple, one layer, stratified, many layers. They also can be classified based on the shape of the cell. Squamous is often egg-shaped looking, flattened oval. Cuboidal is like a cube, and then columnar is like a column. So columnar is rectangular, cuboidal is square, and squamous could be oval. And each of those, remember, can be simple or stratified. So we're going to first talk about simple squamous epithelium. You can know by the actual term, simple, it's one layer, squamous, flattened, oval shaped cells. These are flattened, interlocking looking cells that are very thin in layer. They are found in the lung, the renal, or the kidney, and they do not have any matrix. You can see that it's very compact. So again, it's a single layer of flattened cells. It's found in the lungs. It can line capillaries, line blood vessels, line lymph nodes, very lining. As far as the function, it's going to allow passage of materials by diffusion and filtration. And it also helps secrete. Stratified squamous epithelium. This is multiple layers of those oval cells. Because there's multiple layers, it's a lot of protection, and all of the layers are held together by desmosomes. So you can see here, it's very thick membranes. The function is going to be to protect underlying tissues in areas. It is going to be subject to a lot of abrasion or sloughing off, and that's why it's this important to have the multiple layers. Okay. And it is found in the esophagus, the mouth, the vagina. It could be in the skin epidermis. The next one is simple cuboidal. Simple meaning one row, cuboidal means cubes or rectangles, or I should say squares, excuse me, squares. They have a very big nucleus, if you can see. It functions as secretory, excretory, and absorption. And it is going to line the ducts of glands, the skin, the kidney, thyroid, the eye. One layer of square cells. Main function is going to be secretion and absorption. Okay, the next thing that we're going to have is going to be stratified cuboidal, multiple layers of rectangles. It's going to line ducts, sweat glands, and the function is protection, secretion, and absorption. Simple columnar, one layer of columns. This is going to sometimes have the cilia on it or the villi, and that is going to help increase the surface area. So we find this in the intestine, the gallbladder, some excretory ducts. We have some uterine tubes, the bronchi. If you notice, the nucleus is located on the bottom, and it's a function of absorption and secretion. Now, if it's cilia, we have the ciliated columnar. We find that mostly in the respiratory tract and the fallopian tubes or the uterine tubes, and that's going to help propel those reproductive cells. Stratified columnar is going to be multiple layers of the columns. You can see that it's located in the salivary ducts, so that's in your mouth, areas in the pharynx, the epiglottis, anus, mammary glands, and urethra. And mostly when we have stratified, the function is going to be protection. Okay, so stratified columnar, again, they're stacked columns. All right, pseudostratified columnar is only one layer, but it appears that it's more than one layer, all based on the position of the nucleus. But again, it's only going to be one layer of cells, and it also can be ciliated. Okay, so its function is secretion, propulsion of mucus when we have the cilia. Okay. And it is found in sperm carrying ducts, glands, the trachea, and in the upper respiratory tract. Transitional epithelium is 4 to 6 cells thick. And this is very unusual because it tolerates stretching. So we find this in the bladder, the ureters. And the purpose of this is to allow for that extension so we can hold urine. Sometimes these cells have more than one nuclei, and they are held together with tight junctions. Okay, so the transitional epithelium is going to allow your bladder to stretch to hold the urine. Now we have glandular epithelium. These are things that are going to be secreting substance into ducts or into the bodily fluids. We can find these within columnar and cuboidal epithelium. And there's two main types of glands. There's exocrine glands and there's endocrine glands. The exocrine is going to secrete the products into ducts. So we have the sweat glands, the mammary glands, salivary glands, the pancreas. And then the endocrine glands are going to secrete the products into blood or the tissue fluid. And there is another slide that is going to show you the functions and the descriptions of the merocrine, the apocrine, and the holocrine gland. So you can see here the merocrine glands is a fluid product released through cell membrane through exocytosis. So that is the stuff exiting the cell. Apocrine glands, the cell products or the portions actually pinch off for secretion. And then the holocrine glands, the secretion is when the cells disintegrate, and that's when they would release their secretory products.